Howdy everybody, this is Omar, your audio amigo, here today with another episode of the Planar Project. Today we're looking at what is probably the most highly requested planar for me to look at. This is the venerable Artti T10, released in September of 2023 at an MSRP of $75. At the time, it was part of a sort of wave of more affordable planar IEMs that all hit the market within a few months of each other. You had the PR2, the TRN Rosefinch, and of course the T10 itself. When they came out, the T10 were very well reviewed, and after the PR2 debacle, it became the sort of default best budget planar recommendation for most reviewers. Does that claim hold up, or have some newcomers come to take the king down a peg? Let's find out. Go ahead and start, as usual, with the unboxing. So the unboxing is actually quite nice. You open the box, inside you'll find the IEMs themselves sitting in a little foam tray. Underneath that, you'll find this actually quite nice hard carry case. The logo sort of stuck on there, and the zipper's nice. Inside that, you'll get the cable and 6 sets of ear tips. You get small, medium, and large of both the standard and the wideboard tips. These are actually really nice ear tips. I had no issues with these in terms of comfort or sound. The case feels nice and solid in the hands. Like I said, it has a nice quality zipper. It's not too thick. It's very pocketable. It's not too big overall. I think this is a very well done case. I honestly think this is a pretty good accessories package for $75. I think it meets, if not slightly exceeds, expectations. At $75, I expect a case. This has a nice one. I expect a decent selection of tips. We get 6 here. That's exactly what Artie gave us. Very well done. So let's talk about the cable. This to me feels like a slightly cost-reduced version of the cable that you get on something like the Letshuoer S12. It's a 2-color 4-wire twist with a nice rubber coating that isn't sticky, it doesn't snag on things, feels nice in the hands. It isn't modular, but when you order you get to pick between the 3.5 and 4.4 millimeter flavors. The cable does behave fairly well. It doesn't have a ton of memory to it. The jack you saw was branded with RT, but the Y-split is not. This chin slider is so functional that it sort of becomes non-functional. And the reason I say that is it is an absolute pain to wiggle and slide this, and I'm pulling fairly hard here, to wiggle and slide this down the cable to get it to where you want it. I'm actually not going to put it normally because it takes quite a bit of coaxing to push it back to the stock position. I really don't think it's all that usable. Maybe if it wears in, moving up and down, but I think it's sort of more trouble than it's worth. The ear hooks, the plastic on them is nice. It doesn't really change the color of the cable all that much. The outer layer of plastic doesn't crinkle like I've seen on some aftermarket cables recently. The 2-pin connectors are sort of this nice metal with very clear R and L stereo indicators on them. Overall, I think this is a really nice cable for the price. I personally wish the chin slider was more functional, but I'm also aware that not everybody really cares about chin sliders, so overall I'd say this is a good cable, RT. Well done. So let's talk about the build quality. These to me, actually, let me grab these real quick. These look to me like sort of larger plastic versions of the Letshuoer D13 and that sort of style design. These are polycarbonate shells with a UV treatment process to enhance their longevity and sturdiness. They do feel really nice and solid in the hands. They feel kind of like a piece of medical equipment. The top plate features a metal circle with really fine concentric circles machined into it. I think that's really quite nice. The nozzles are molded into the lower shells, and they have a little metal mesh set into the nozzles. As you can see there, if I move it around, there's no tuning foam behind the mesh, so you can add some if you really need to. You get a couple of vents. You get one sort of there, what I'm assuming is right above the driver, and you get another one here by the connector on the sort of seam line between the top and bottom halves of the shell. Overall, these feel very sturdy and very strong. The offset sort of connector housing, I think, means it will be more durable in the long run. I feel like I've seen a couple of threads and anecdotes dedicated to these units failing, out of the box than I do for some other planar IEMs. I was missing a metal filter on my RT R3s, if you remember that review. I would say, just in case, buy these from a reputable seller with a good return policy, because I do feel like I see a bit more dead-on-arrival units for the T10 than I do some of these other ones here. But let's go ahead and pull up the specifications. Inside the T10, we've got the tried and true 14mm planar driver that we've seen in, let's see, it's in the S12, the Timeless, the S12 Pro, the Zacian Wu, the Raptco Hook X, the Hidizs MP145, the NiceHCK F1 Pro. I can't tell without completely disassembling the driver what actual parts this is using. But like I said in my SGOR Luna review, the manufacturer of these drivers will let you pick and choose your own configuration of the parts they offer so long as they're compatible with each other. I'm going to speculate that the T10 is using a hybrid 2nd/3rd gen design like so many of the other sets that are using this driver. The only set I know of that implements the full 3rd generation design is the Letshuoer S15. And I'm going to speculate further, and based on looking at driver diagrams, I would assume that basically everyone else is using either a full 2nd gen driver or a 2nd gen driver upgraded with some 3rd gen bits, specifically I know the MP145 has the 3rd gen front housing, but the 2nd gen back, which is interesting. But that's enough about drivers, let's go ahead and move on. The polycarbonate shells and lack of big metal parts make these actually the lightest planar IEMs in my collection. They're lighter than things like the Luna and the PR2. The nozzles are average in terms of length and width, and they shouldn't pose a problem for comfort, but we'll see when we come to that section. The impedance and sensitivity combine to make this the 4th most power-hungry IEM in my collection. I wouldn't say you need to go out and buy a super powerful desktop amp or a massively expensive powerful dongle for these. And some sources, like my digital audio players and my laptop, will power these just fine. But I would recommend that you pick up at least a cheap dongle, a decent quality one, something from like one of the cheaper FiiOs, the KA11 or one of the J-Sally ones, to power these. I wouldn't go absolutely crazy. Like I said, just something with a bit more juice than like the Apple dongle would be fine. Nothing too expensive. But now it's time for the cool wall. The T10 I feel like are very polarizing in terms of looks. I'll admit, when I first saw these, I'm just like, oh, it's a hearing aid from the 1970s. But as I, got used to them, wore them, saw them more in everyday life, the design did grow on me. I don't think they're completely hideous, but I'm still not a fan of the overall looks. Some folks might dig these in a sort of retro tribute fashion kind of way, and I see that. But as someone who actually has a bunch of vintage electronics, to me, this sort of beige medical implement plastic only really looks good on like some vintage computers and maybe some appliances. I'm going to be sticking these in uncool, and that does hurt me spiritually a little bit. But actually, I think the ladies will agree with me on this one. Speaking of, let's see what the Council of Ladies has to say about these. I'm really not expecting these to do well. I have a sort of general idea of their fashion sense, and there we go. Not a single positive response in the bunch. So if they don't think it's pretty, they're, definitely not going to compliment these at all. Yeah, no, it's just bad all over the place. Let's go ahead and see what they have to say about these. I think this is the first time the ladies have ever used an emoji. Shame it has to be that one. Not cute at all. Well, hopefully they don't look how they sound. Moving on to comfort. As I discussed in the specifications section, these are very light and a bit on the large side, but they did fit my ears pretty well overall. I was able to wear these for several hours with no comfort issues. The inside of the shells, that sort of funnelish design, fit my ear cavity quite well. I was able to get shallow or deep fits with no issues or discomfort. As far as Mrs. Audio Amigo goes, at first these passed the tiny ears test. She could get and maintain a seal, and they sort of fit her okay, but she found out that as she smiled or ate or talked while wearing these, the seal quickly failed and they came undone and fell out of her ears. Something about the shape of these meant that as she moved her jaw, the shell would come into contact with part of her ear, and it would sort of wiggle these loose. That in combination with the sort of radius of the ear hooks just didn't work out well for her. She wanted to give these a pass, but sort of a half pass. But because there are a lot of folks out there with smaller ears, we decided to give these a fail because I personally hate it when I'm having to constantly adjust the way the IEMs fit in my ears. Let's go ahead and get into how these sound. We'll start with what, as you all know, I personally think is the strong suit of the Planar driver, which is the bass response. The T10 has a pretty satisfying bass boost to its tonality. The sub bass has excellent extension and rumble, and the mid bass is punchy without seeming overpowering. I think this set handled Tiesto's Boom collab with 7 extremely well. The song has some layered bass drops. You get sort of low sub bass drops with some mid bass drops above it, and then some mid-range, notes layered on top. And these were absolutely fantastic here, as are most planars that I throw this song at. The speed of the Planar driver lets you feel the deep rumble of the low notes as well as the thump and punch of the higher frequency drops, and it does all of that without masking any notes or detail from the drops. I think it's an excellent set for electronic or produced bass drops. As far as bass guitars and kick drums go, I listened to Led Zeppelin's When the Levee Breaks. That famous John Bonham kick drum intro. It's very well represented here. It has the reverb, echoey, sort of snappy effect that it had. It has the gravitas that it was sort of engineered and designed to have when they recorded it. This set does the song justice. I think it's an excellent replay to my ears. Zero issues with the bass presentation on this set. It's not boosted to super exciting or crazy proportions, but the quality of the bass, in addition to the, in my opinion, very palatable boost, makes for an excellent overall presentation. Moving on to the mid-range, by now, y'all know the story. Because this is a planar, the mid-bass boost doesn't really impact the mid-range. What that means is, for tracks like Leonard Skinner's Simple Man, it sounds very correct to my ears. Ronnie Van Zant's vocals don't have any added husk or darker tonality to them. You can easily pick out and separate all the instruments in the mix. The bass guitar has good presence. The cymbals and drums have good energy. I think it's an overall excellent replay. The same goes for female vocals. I've been listening to a lot of Otto lately. I'm going to bring her up here and in the next section because the things that she does with her voice are just really special, unique, and fun, and really epic sounding, actually. I like Show, which I think is just an absolutely fun track by Otto. She's all over the place here. She has low growling notes, high squeaky sounds, some yodeling, and even some very, metal type screaming going on. This set absolutely does her justice. I'll discuss a bit more about the harmonics in the next section, but as far as the vocal fundamental frequencies go, they are uncolored and they are replayed accurately. Again, there's no masking issues with the percussion in this track or the sitar, and there's no part of her vocal range that feels unnaturally boosted or silenced compared to any other part of her vocal range, which is very important because it's an extremely wide range here. If anything, actually, this set has a tiny bit of female vocal forwardness that reminds me a little bit of the Tongzu Warner. It's not as pronounced as the Warner's vocals, but it's still here. It has a tiny bit of special sauce. Overall, this is a clean, accurate mid-range with great vocals and good instrument separation. Moving on to the upper mids and treble, other than a tiny bit of vocal emphasis, I think this is overall a very clean and smooth treble presentation. The upper mids are boosted, but not in a fatiguing or sort of shouty way. Same goes for the treble. It's not fatiguing. We'll go ahead and get started with female vocals because I was just talking about it. We'll go back to Otto's Show. So during the songs, she'll breathe into the microphone. There's moments where she'll force her voice to crack to achieve an effect. And she has these long notes with vibrato and very sharp and abrupt pitch changes. And all of these things end up generating subtones and overtones that are picked up as harmonics in the recording. If you have too much emphasis on these harmonics, the replay will quickly lose its naturalness. It might have a bit of, sparkliness that some people might like, but I prefer a more natural replay, and that loss in naturalness I really don't like dealing with. I feel like this set walks that tightrope on the harmonics very well. The harmonics don't decay unnaturally, nor are they overblown to the point where they cause tonal changes in the fundamentals. It's the same story with cymbals. Iron Maiden's 2 Minutes to Midnight. You have the high harmonics on the cymbals meaning that they decay naturally and cleanly. There's no off-tonality, there's no excessive washiness, and there's no piercing sharpness to them. They don't overwhelm the replay like they can in other planars, and there's no unnatural boost in the sort of mid treble that makes the cymbal sound weird or off to me. Yeah, I think that cymbals are nice and present. They're not fatiguing or piercing. Overall, I think the treble presentation here is very mature. I think it's very well done. Moving on to technicalities. The low-end technicals are predictably great. The Who's Sugan Esena sounds fantastic. The subtones generated by the Mongolian throat singing are all audible in the replay. There's great low-end detail retrieval as a whole. The thunderclap at the beginning is very clear here. It's a great replay for that song. As you get higher in frequency, the planar driver continues to shine. This set keeps doing well. The Osborne Brothers Rocky Top, it's a bluegrass classic for a reason. It's a technical tour de force, and you'll hear every individual pick. You'll hear the fingernails hitting those strings. You'll hear the rakes on the drums. It's really, really well represented in terms of detail here. I feel like most planars are very technical, and I think this is right up there with them. I think the driver in the set's doing its job very well. I think this is a really good technical showing. For stereo separation, I went and listened to Mediterranean Sundance because I had to get a good earful of those guitars. They sound really, really just crisp on planars. As expected, zero issues with the replay. Paco and Al in their respective ears. The sound doesn't feel claustrophobic. The audience has plenty of room to breathe and has good air to it. As far as the perceived 3D soundstage goes, this set will not hold back any well-mastered tracks. Jiro Inagaki's Painted Paradise has all of the instruments where I expect them to be. The guitar off to your left, the bass and the drums behind you, you got some horns to your right in the distance, and then some a bit more forward than the rest of them, it sounds like. And then the keyboard is like immediately to your right. It's a good replay with a really nice 3D feeling to it. Overall, I'd say this set has great stereo separation and a soundstage that's on par with IEMs, I would say. All right, so time for comparisons. To my ears, the T10 are what I would describe as a sort of mild V-shape tuning. The bass and the treble are boosted, but not too crazy, levels. The mids also aren't really recessed. So because of that, I'm going to be comparing it to comparable planars sort of in and above, below the price range. We'll go ahead and get started. We'll start with the new kid on the block, the SGOR Luna, at $38. The Luna was a complete surprise to me. To me, it came out of nowhere, and it took the crown of best budget planar by simply having a pretty good tuning and a decent cable at under 40 bucks. I mentioned this in my Luna review, but in my opinion, the T10 is a clear step up from the Luna. The T10 has a bit more of that nice sub-bass rumble. It has a smoother, more refined treble presentation. It doesn't have that sort of wavy wonkiness that the Luna can have in some cymbals and female vocals. The T10 also has, better accessories, but at MSRP, the Luna is just about half the price of the T10. So in terms of overall value, I would actually say that these two are about equal. The T10 isn't really twice as good, but, better accessories, better cable, nicer overall sound. And honestly, the T10 can regularly be found on sale for closer to $50. At that price, I'd say if you can afford the extra, $10, $12 for the T10, it's honestly the better buy. Real quick, I wanted to bring up the Letshuoer S08 because it's very popular and for good reason. And I wanted to just give my thoughts on it versus the T10 real quick. These two are actually tuned quite differently. Next to the smooth, warm, musical presentation of the S08, the T10 comes off as bright and energetic. The S08 has more bass punch, it has better rumble. The bass quality is overall similar. They're both planars. This one's a bit smaller, but it has that double voice coil to make up for it. I personally believe the overall detail resolution on these is essentially the same. Maybe a slight edge to the S08 at higher volumes, and that just might be my own personal bias talking. Treble details are a bit more forward in the T10 thanks to the extra energy up top in the treble. but they're still there in the S08, and the S08 lets you crank up the volume a bit more than the T10 does. Overall, both these sets are great. I personally find myself grabbing the S08 every time if my wife hasn't taken it. But folks who prefer the sort of traditional, brighter planar tuning, folks who prefer the planar technicalities in the higher end, will probably prefer the T10 and be happy with it. Moving on, we have another great planar, this time using the same 14mm driver that the T10 has. This is the NiceHCK F1 Pro at about $100. So the way I would describe this one is the F1 Pro is a slightly more neutral sound compared to the T10. The F1 Pro has the same, vocal forwardness that the T10 has, but it's got less bass. It's got a slightly reduced upper mid range and a sort of similar smooth treble. I actually really like the F1 Pro. I think it's a very clean, neutral presentation compared to basically all the other planars, especially to things like the T10, which is bassier, more exciting. In terms of accessories, I do prefer the cable on the F1 Pro just because it has a functional chin slider, and I think it's that's what NiceHCK is known for, is their cables. Yeah, they both come with good hard side cases. They both come with good selections of ear tips. These two are overall very similar in terms of accessories. I would say if you feel like the T10 has too much bass, then check out the F1 Pro. I think it's another very well done planar. I will give this a full review at some point. I do, however, feel like the T10 is overall the better value, and I think more people will enjoy the T10 because of that extra bass and that little bit of extra upper mid-range vocal energy that this has. Next up, we have the grandpappy of most of these IEMs, and the one I feel that actually has the most in common with the T10. This is the original Letshuoer S12, priced at an MSRP of $150. I'm just going to put it right here because I think it's closer. It's no secret that Artti tuned the T10 to sort of mimic the S12. I haven't touched too much on the relationship between Artti and Letshuoer until now because honestly, I've read a lot of conflicting information online. I've read some places that Artti was born from Letshuoer's OEM manufacturing partner, kind of like Zygat came out of Thea Audio and all those other companies that use Zygat as their OEM. I've heard other people say that Artti and Volkjoy, which is their parent company, are straight up subsidiaries of Letshuoer and that they're all one big happy family. And I've even heard some rumors that Artti is like a sister brand started by ex-Letshuoer engineers, kind of like what happened with Moondrop and Truthier, where they're like sister brands but still competing each other, but like the engineers, share work, and I don't know what the truth is. All I know is that it's very clear to me that these companies are related in some way. The T10 is essentially the S12's driver in a larger plastic version of the shell from the D13 that I brought up earlier. The tuning on the T10 is basically the S12 tuning with a little bit less sparkle and shine in the mid-treble region. Some folks will really like that change. Others will sit here and say that this is a bit muted compared to the S12. Personally, I see the S12 as sort of just a more premium version of the T10. When they're both on sale, the S12 is still double the price of the T10, and it doesn't really seem worth it from a pure sound quality perspective. The S12 does have better shells. They feel more premium, they're all metal, they're smaller. It has, in what is my opinion, a nicer cable. Both carrying cases are about the same. The accessories packages are, again, honestly, mostly the same. The S12 does give you some foam tips, though. Sound-wise, I do find myself personally preferring the S12, but I think that's down to small differences in the design and the venting and the tuning rather than technicalities. I mean, these are the same driver after all. The technical performance for these 14mm drivers is basically the same, especially if they're all using the second-gen diaphragm. Any differences in sound quality that I've noticed can be explained by the fact that the S12 has a different shaped all-metal shell. Metal interacts with sound waves differently from plastic. Also, the S12 has different vents and dampers placed in different areas. Honestly, I would say if you like this sound signature and you have the money for an S12, grab the S12. It's the more premium feeling unit. It sounds to me just that tiny bit better. But I mean, come on. The T10 is half the price. It's a much better value in my opinion. Next up, we have the S12, but the Pro, and it's really long modular connection here. The S12 Pro is priced at $170. And basically everything I said about the normal S12 in terms of build quality, accessories, overall sound applies here. But the tuning is the main big difference here. The S12 Pro is a warmer and less treble intense version of the S12 and by extension the T10. It's a smoother, warmer sound signature overall with a bit more bass and a tiny bit less energy in the treble. It's mostly the same, honestly, up there. Again, it's the small nuances that make me prefer the S12 Pro to the T10. Again, if you have the budget for the S12 Pro, you should grab it. It's got a nicer cable. The cable's modular. To me, it sounds a bit better. I prefer that slightly warmer sound. But again, the T10 is less than half the price. In terms of value, this absolutely smashes this at $170. Finally, we have the Hidizs MP145 at $160. Like the S08, I don't really feel like the MP145 is a great comparison versus the T10 because this is a warmer, bassier, darker sound compared to the T10. So in terms of tuning, everything I said about the S08 is, holds true for the MP145. Treble detail will be more forward in the T10. The MP145 will have more bass and similar, if not, slightly more overall resolution once you crank up the volume. I know some people will disagree with me, but I personally think the S08 is just straight up a cheaper, better version of the MP145. And that being the case, while I might prefer, again, the tuning on the MP145, well, I might grab this one to listen to over the T10 easily destroys the MP145, again, in terms of value. So to wrap everything up, the T10 is the logical step-up upgrade from the SGOR Luna, which I still maintain is the best planar under $50. It also, the T10, competes very well with basically every planar in the $80 to $200 range, including its spiritual predecessor, the S12. The sound profile places it as a slightly more relaxed S12. It comes off as brighter than the S08, the S12 Pro, and the MP145, and it's a more V-shaped, exciting sound than the more neutral F1 Pro. Strictly speaking, the T10 doesn't lose in the accessories department to any of these, except I would say the S08 and the S12 Pro, and that's only because these come with modular cables, so they're more versatile. But yeah, if you put the budget-oriented Luna to the side, all of these come with minimum 2 sets of ear tips. Some of these come with foams, okay? They all come with a hard carry case with a nice zipper, and yet all of these are $100 or more, and these are $75 on sale for $50. I think that basically says everything you need to know about the value. That's enough comparisons. Let's see just how high the T10 can climb on the AudioAmigo Arbitrary rating scale. This here is what I would call a really complete package. It's got a nice cable, it's got good build quality, it's got a good selection of included ear tips, and it gives you all of that at what I think is actually a very competitive price. This should be a very easy IEM to rank if it weren't for one thing, and I'm going to go ahead and say, as you all know, my ranking list considers IEMs at their manufacturer's suggested retail price, okay? Not the sale price that it's typically found for on the street. I treated the Delchi as if it cost $75, even though it's been essentially permanently on sale for $60. I treated the EDC Pro as if it costs $15, even though it's very, very easily found for $10 or less. So, while I can personally run out right now and buy a set of these for $50 here in the US, that is not the case for everyone across the world. Even at $75 though, this I think is the absolute king of value for planar IEMs. At $75, the T10 gets ranked at "This is brilliant," but there's a big caveat here. Just like in my EDC Pro review, where I said that it could move up to "This is brilliant" if you could get under 10, I'm going to officially state that if you can get this for 50 bucks or under, this belongs in the you should buy this category easily. I'm sorry if that disappoints some people who might have been expecting this to be in the you should buy this category at 75, but I got a lot of comments in my SGOR Luna review from people in different countries saying that the T10 was closer to 100 for them. So just purely because I want my ranking list to be at MSRP so it's equal for everyone, I'm going to put it in This Is Brilliant with an asterisk that lets it move up if it's on sale. So, do I recommend these? Honestly, 100% yes. There's an old episode of Top Gear where they're testing a bunch of family sedans, and Jeremy Clarkson gets in the mid to late 2000s Ford Mondeo, and he says something that I think applies almost perfectly to the T10. He gets in it, he says, the Ford Mondeo, it's good looking, fast, fun to drive, economical, spacious, practical, and really good value for money. And he says that every time he drives one, he can't help but wonder why anybody would buy anything else. And honestly, that's kind of how I feel about the Artti T10. Okay, maybe it doesn't look the best, and the chin slider is borderline useless. But with how mature this is tuned compared to, the stuff more expensive than it, how much it costs, what you get in the box for that money, honestly, if you have 50 to 75 bucks and you're just looking for a good IEM, maybe you prefer that V-shaped sound that has a little bit of extra bass and a little bit of extra treble, this will work for basically any genre. It has technical performance that easily competes with IEMs in the $150, $100 to $200 range. Honestly, look no further than this little gem. I think this is an absolute steal at anything 50 bucks or under. And I think that even at 75, I think it's easily the best planar value on the market. But that's going to wrap this one up. I know the Artti T10 gets a decent amount of hype online, and I just want to say, I feel like it's deserved. There's a bunch of IEMs that I feel, for me personally anyway, don't live up to the hype. The MP145, for example, the Pula PA02, which I will do a video on. But yeah, I think in this case, the hype is deserved. It's just a great planar at a great price. Speaking of planars, I have heard about the KZ PRX. I will get it in as soon as it's available from a store that I can get it from with a decent price and shipping. I've heard a lot of good things about it. How it's basically the PR2, which was the best KZ planar by far, but even slightly better. So I'll get that in and see how it stacks up against the Luna. I'm also keeping an eye out for the upcoming FiiO planar, which should be interesting. I actually don't own any FiiO IEMs, so I think getting the FiiO planar would be interesting. And hopefully my MP143 from Hidizs ships at some point. So that's coming up, and we'll see if it can take down the S08, which I don't think it can, especially since it's priced at $30 more. But we'll see how it stacks up versus the S08. But yeah, in the short term, keep an eye out for my Letshuoer Planar Buyer's Guide coming soon, TM. Working on that at the moment. But yeah, for now, that's about it. As always, I really appreciate all your support. Thank you all so much for watching. This has been Omar with AudioAmigoReviews, and I'll catch y'all next time.